Now let's begin. The morning started like any other Saturday. Russell Dyer stood in his kitchen, watching his 8-year-old son Sam pour cereal into a bowl with the intense concentration only a child could muster. Sunlight streamed through the windows of their modest but comfortable home in suburban Connecticut, and for a moment, everything felt right. "Dad, can I have chocolate milk instead of regular?" Sam asked, his dark hair falling into his eyes. "Your mom said no chocolate before noon on weekends," Russell replied, ruffling his son's hair. "But she's at yoga, so I didn't hear anything." Sam grinned, that gap-toothed smile that made Russell's chest tighten with a fierce, protective love. The boy had his mother's eyes, bright and curious, but Russell saw himself in the stubborn set of Sam's jaw. Russell's phone buzzed. His wife, Naomi. "Taking Sam to my parents for lunch. Mom wants to see him. Be back by 3. Russell frowned. He'd planned to take Sam to the batting cages, maybe grab burgers after. But he also knew better than to argue about Naomi's mother. Dolores Rogers had a way of turning simple disagreements into week-long cold wars. "Sure," he texted back, keeping it simple. Naomi arrived home 20 minutes later, her yoga mat still tucked under her arm. She was beautiful in that effortless way that had first caught Russell's attention 12 years ago. Tall, athletic, with auburn hair pulled into a ponytail. But lately, there'd been a tension in her shoulders that never quite left. "Ready, baby?" she called to Sam. "Do I have to go to Grandma's?" Sam asked quietly, and Russell caught the hesitation in his voice. "Of course you do. Grandma Dolores is making her special pot roast." Naomi smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "And she got you a new book about dinosaurs." Russell knew that tone. It was the one Naomi used when she was trying to convince herself as much as Sam. He'd noticed it more often over the past year, especially after visits to the Rogers household. "I'll come with you," Russell offered, standing up from the table. "Mom specifically said just me and Sam," Naomi said quickly. "She wants quality grandparent time. You know how she is." Russell did know. Dolores Rogers had made it clear from the moment Russell and Naomi started dating that he wasn't quite good enough for her daughter. He came from a working-class family in Boston. His father had been a union electrician, his mother a school cafeteria manager. Meanwhile, the Rogers family had old money from Naomi's grandfather's pharmaceutical patents. Not Rockefeller money, but enough to buy a 6-bedroom house in Greenwich and maintain memberships at the yacht club and country club. "It's just lunch, Russ," Naomi added softly, and he heard the plea underneath. "Don't make this harder than it already is." He kissed her forehead. "Drive safe." After they left, Russell tried to distract himself with work. He'd built a successful consulting practice over the past decade, specializing in crisis negotiation and conflict resolution. Companies called him when their executives were at each other's throats, when hostile takeovers turned personal, when million-dollar deals hung in the balance because of human egos and emotions. He'd learned to read people like most people read newspapers, quickly, efficiently, and between the lines. His specialization had come from an unexpected place. After college, Russell had spent 6 years as a hostage negotiator for the FBI. He'd talked down armed suspects, convinced desperate people to release their captives, and learned that everyone, no matter how irrational they seemed, had a pressure point. A button that, once pushed, could make them fold. He'd left the bureau after a situation in Atlanta went sideways. A bank robber had 3 hostages, and Russell had almost convinced him to surrender when a tactical team commander, overconfident and trigger-happy, had made an unauthorized entry. 2 hostages died in the crossfire. The robber survived, was convicted, and Russell walked away with his letter of resignation already written. Now he used those same skills in boardrooms instead of crime scenes. The pay was better, the stakes were lower, and he could sleep at night. Mostly. His phone rang at 1:47 p.m. Unknown number, local area code. "Mr. Dyer? This is Greenwich Hospital emergency room." The world tilted. "Your son Samuel was brought in about 20 minutes ago. Non-life-threatening injuries, but we need you to come in. Your wife is with him." Russell didn't remember the drive. One moment he was in his kitchen. The next he was running through the antiseptic bright corridors of Greenwich Hospital, his heart hammering against his ribs. He found them in a treatment bay. Sam sat on the examination table, both hands wrapped in white gauze that was already showing spots of red. Naomi stood beside him, her face pale and tear-streaked. A young doctor was making notes on a tablet. "Dad," Sam's voice broke, and Russell saw tears streaming down his son's face. What happened? Russell's voice came out calmer than he felt, that old FBI training kicking in. Assess the situation. Get the facts. Lacerations to both palms and several fingers, the doctor said. We've cleaned and bandaged them. No nerve damage, thankfully, but he'll need to keep them dry and come back in 3 days for a wound check. How did this happen? Sam looked at his mother, then down at his bandaged hands. I dropped a glass at Grandma's house. It was an accident. I was trying to help clear the table, and it slipped. Russell knelt in front of his son, keeping his voice gentle. Accidents happen, buddy. But how did you cut your hands? Sam's lip trembled. Grandma said I needed to learn to be more careful. She made me pick up all the pieces. She said boys need to learn responsibility, and that my generation is too soft. The room went very quiet. Russell felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. She made you pick up broken glass? With your bare hands? Sam nodded. She said if I was old enough to break things, I was old enough to clean up my messes properly. Mom tried to stop her, but Grandma said she was undermining her authority in her own home. Russell looked at Naomi. She met his eyes, and he saw shame and fury and helplessness all tangled together. I couldn't. Naomi's voice cracked. I grabbed paper towels and tried to help him, but Mom pushed me away. By the time I got Sam to listen to me instead of her, and we got to the bathroom to rinse his hands, there was so much blood. Where is Dolores now? Russell asked, still in that too calm voice. At home. She said we were being dramatic, and that a few cuts never killed anyone. She told us not to come back until we could show proper appreciation for family discipline. Russell stood slowly. He looked at the doctor. He's okay to go home? Yes. Pain management is just children's ibuprofen. Watch for signs of infection, redness, swelling, fever. But he should heal fine. Thank you. Russell turned to Sam. You were really brave, buddy. I'm proud of you. I'm sorry I broke the glass, Sam whispered. You have nothing to be sorry for. Nothing. Do you understand me? Sam nodded, but Russell could see the confusion and hurt in his eyes. His son was 8 years old, and he was apologizing for bleeding. They drove home in Naomi's car, Russell behind the wheel because Naomi's hands were shaking too badly. Sam fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from pain and stress. When they pulled into their driveway, Russell carried his son inside and tucked him into bed, still fully dressed except for his shoes. He kissed Sam's forehead and found Naomi in their bedroom, sitting on the edge of their bed, staring at nothing. She's always been controlling, Naomi said quietly. You know that. The comments about my weight, the criticism about how we're raising Sam, the suggestions about your career. But this, her voice broke. Russ, I watched my mother hurt our son, and I couldn't stop her. In that moment, I was so scared of confronting her that I let it happen. Russell sat beside her, taking her hand. This isn't your fault, isn't it? I've spent 32 years learning how to appease her, how to avoid her anger. And today, that instinct almost. She looked up at him. What kind of mother does that make me? The kind who's been trained since childhood to fear her own mother's disapproval. That's not weakness, Naomi. That's conditioning. Russell had seen it in his negotiation work. People trapped in patterns of behavior that had been beaten into them over decades. Breaking free required more than just willpower. It required rewiring your entire understanding of a relationship. What do we do now? Naomi asked. Russell thought about Sam's bandaged hands. About the tremor in his son's voice when he'd apologized for bleeding. About the casual cruelty of a woman who would hurt a child to prove a point about authority. I'm going to talk to her, Russell said. Russ, you know how she is. I'm going to talk to her, Russell repeated, and something in his voice made Naomi stop. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something that made her take a breath. What are you going to do? I'm going to teach her the same lesson she taught Sam. Russell stood up. She said he needed to learn responsibility. Well, so does she. He drove to Greenwich in the gathering dusk. The Rogers house was a sprawling colonial with white pillars and a circular driveway. Russell had always found it cold and unwelcoming, despite, or perhaps because of, its obvious wealth. Dolores answered the door herself. She was 63, impeccably dressed in slacks and a cashmere sweater, her silver hair cut in a severe bob. She looked at Russell with barely disguised disdain. Russell, I assume Naomi sent you to apologize for her overreaction. I want to talk about what happened to Sam. What happened is that boy learned a valuable lesson about being careful, something his parents apparently can't be bothered to teach him. She started to close the door. Russell put his hand against it, not forcefully, just firmly enough to keep it open. You made my 8-year-old son pick up broken glass with his bare hands. His fingers were bleeding. We had to take him to the emergency room. Don't be so dramatic. Children are far too coddled these days. A few cuts teach character. Character, Russell repeated softly. He looked at her, really looked at her, and recognized what he'd seen dozens of times in negotiation rooms. A bully. Someone who used power and fear to control others because it was the only way they knew how to feel important. You hurt my son to prove you could, Russell said. You wanted to show Naomi that you're still in charge, and you used Sam to do it. That's not discipline, Dolores. That's abuse. Dolores's face flushed. How dare you come to my home and— I'm not done, Russell interrupted, his voice still calm. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to apologize to Sam. You're going to explain that what you did was wrong. And you're going to promise, in front of both Naomi and me, that you will never put your hands on our son again. Dolores laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. Or what? You'll keep my daughter away from me? Naomi would never. I'm not interested in keeping anyone from anyone, Russell said. But you should know something about me, Dolores. I spent 6 years with the FBI. I specialized in finding people's pressure points. The things they care about most. The things they're most afraid to lose. She narrowed her eyes. Is that a threat? It's a fact. You made Sam pick up broken glass with his bare hands. You taught him that the people who are supposed to love him will hurt him if he makes mistakes. Russell leaned slightly forward. He needed to learn, you said. Well, so do you. Get off my property. Russell smiled, and it was not a kind smile. 24 hours, Dolores. You have 24 hours to call Naomi, apologize to Sam, and show genuine remorse. If you don't— He paused. Well, we'll see what lessons you need to learn. You can't. 24 hours, Russell repeated. He turned and walked back to his car, leaving Dolores standing in her doorway, her face purple with rage. As he drove away, Russell pulled out his phone and made the first of several calls. He'd meant every word. Dolores Rogers was going to learn that hurting his son came with consequences. And by the time he was done, she'd have 47 missed calls begging him to make it stop. But first, he needed to make some preparations. Russell arrived home to find Naomi sitting at the kitchen table, nursing a glass of wine. She looked up when he entered, questions in her eyes. How did it go? I gave her 24 hours to apologize to Sam. Naomi's laugh was bitter. You know she won't. Mom doesn't apologize. She doesn't think she's ever wrong. I know. Russell poured himself a glass of whiskey, the good stuff he saved for special occasions. This qualified. Which is why I'm prepared for what comes next. Russ, what are you planning? He looked at his wife. This woman he'd loved for 12 years, who'd been trapped in her mother's web of manipulation for 3 decades. Do you trust me? Of course I do. But then trust me to handle this. Your mother hurt Sam to prove she had power over you. I'm going to show her what real power looks like. Naomi studied his face. You're scaring me a little. Don't be scared. Be ready. Because once this starts, your mother is going to come at us hard. She's going to say terrible things. She's going to try to turn your father and anyone else she can against us. Can you stand firm? Naomi thought about Sam's bandaged hands. About the years of subtle put-downs and not-so-subtle control. About every time she'd swallowed her anger to keep the peace. Yes, she said quietly. Yes, I can. Good. Russell pulled out his laptop. Then let me tell you about your mother's pressure points. The next morning was Sunday. Russell woke early, kissed Naomi's sleeping form, and checked on Sam. The boy was still asleep, his bandaged hands resting on top of the covers. Russell felt that cold, hard thing in his chest solidify into pure resolve. He spent 2 hours in his home office, making calls and sending emails. By 9 a.m., he had everything in place. At 9:17 a.m., his phone rang. Dolores Rogers. He let it go to voicemail. At 9:33 a.m., she called again. Voicemail. 9:41 a.m. Voicemail. Naomi appeared in his doorway around 10 a.m., holding her phone. My mother's been calling me. She sounds panicked. She's saying her bank accounts are frozen. Russell nodded. The first pressure point. Dolores and Gregory have their primary accounts at Connecticut Private Bank. I used to consult for them on a fraud prevention system. Made some good friends there, including the VP of Security, Marcus Hendricks. You got her accounts frozen? Not exactly. Marcus flagged suspicious activity, specifically several large wire transfers that appeared to be going to overseas accounts. Standard procedure is to freeze everything pending investigation. Usually takes 72 hours to clear, sometimes longer if the paperwork gets misplaced. Naomi's eyes widened. But she didn't make any wire transfers. Of course not. But there were definitely transfer attempts made from her IP address. Failed attempts, but enough to trigger the bank's security protocols. You hacked her computer? I made a phone call to an associate who specializes in digital security consulting. What he does with that information is his business. Russell's voice was mild. Your mother can't access her money. Can't use her credit cards. Can't write checks. Everything's frozen while the bank investigates. Naomi sat down heavily. She's going to lose her mind. That's the idea. But we're just getting started. At 10:15 a.m., Dolores called Naomi again. This time, Naomi answered on speakerphone. Naomi, thank God. Something terrible has happened. All our accounts are frozen, and the bank is saying there's suspicious activity, and your father is on the golf course, and I can't reach him. Mom, Naomi interrupted, her voice steady. Did you call to apologize to Sam? Silence. Because Russ gave you 24 hours to apologize for hurting our son. Have you done that? This isn't about that nonsense. I'm trying to tell you we've been hacked or something, and then I can't help you, Naomi said, and Russell felt a surge of pride at the strength in her voice. Russ said you had 24 hours. You have about 14 left. You can't be serious. I'm your mother, and Sam is your grandson, the one you made bleed to prove a point. Dolores's voice turned vicious. You always were an ungrateful child. I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me? By siding with that man over your own family. That man is my husband, and Sam is my son. They're my family, Mom. You're the one who chose to hurt a child. Dolores hung up. Naomi looked at Russell, her hands trembling slightly. I've never done that before. You did great. He squeezed her hand. How do you feel? Terrified. Exhilarated. Sick to my stomach. She laughed shakily. All of the above. It gets easier. Now why don't you go check on Sam? I have a few more calls to make. The second pressure point was social standing. Dolores Rogers prided herself on her position in Greenwich society. She served on the boards of 3 charities, was a member of the Yacht Club's social committee, and hosted an annual garden party that was considered one of the summer's must-attend events. Russell had cultivated relationships with people in Greenwich too. His crisis consulting work had brought him into contact with several prominent families, including the Ashworths, who essentially ran the Greenwich Preservation Society. He called Catherine Ashworth, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who Russell had helped navigate a messy internal dispute at her company the previous year. Russell, how lovely to hear from you. How's that beautiful son of yours? That's actually why I'm calling, Catherine. Sam was injured yesterday at his grandmother's house. He explained what had happened, keeping his tone factual, letting the details speak for themselves. Catherine's voice turned icy. Dolores Rogers made a child pick up broken glass. That's unconscionable. I thought you should know, given that she's on several boards with you. I'd hate for her behavior to reflect poorly on the organizations you both support. Say no more. I'll make some calls. By noon, Dolores had been quietly asked to step down from 2 charity boards, pending an internal review of board member conduct. The garden party that she'd been planning for June had lost its primary sponsor. Dolores called Naomi 6 more times between noon and 2 p.m. Naomi didn't answer. Russell was in his office when Gregory Rogers finally called. Naomi's father was a quiet man, dominated by his wife, but not unintelligent. Russell, Dolores says you're behind what's happening. What's happening, Gregory? The bank accounts. The board positions. She's convinced you're orchestrating some kind of attack. I gave Dolores 24 hours to apologize to Sam for hurting him. She has about 12 hours left. Look, I know what happened was unfortunate. Unfortunate. Russell's voice sharpened. Your wife made my 8-year-old son pick up broken glass with his bare hands until he was bleeding badly enough to need emergency room treatment. That's not unfortunate, Gregory. That's child abuse. Silence on the line. I know Dolores can be strict, Gregory said carefully. But she raised Naomi just fine. Did she? Or did she raise a daughter so afraid of her disapproval that Naomi froze while her own son was being hurt? More silence. Sam is your grandson, Russell continued. And right now, you're choosing to defend the person who hurt him. I want you to think about what that means. What do you want, Russell? An apology, genuine remorse, and a promise that Dolores will never lay a hand on Sam again. And if she apologizes, all this other stuff stops? That depends on whether the apology is real. See, Gregory, here's the thing. I'm very good at reading people. It's what I do for a living. So if Dolores calls and gives some half-assed non-apology just to make this stop, I'll know. And it will get worse. Worse than freezing our bank accounts and getting her kicked off charity boards. Russell smiled, though Gregory couldn't see it. Much worse. We're only at pressure point number 2. He hung up before Gregory could respond. By 4 p.m., Russell had activated the third pressure point, family reputation. The Rogers family had long prided themselves on their standing in Greenwich. Dolores's father had been a respected pharmaceutical researcher, and the family name carried weight. But Russell had discovered something interesting during his research into Dolores's background. Her father, Albert Rogers, had indeed developed several important patents. But he'd also been investigated twice by the FDA for potential falsification of clinical trial data. Both investigations had been quietly settled, but the records existed if you knew where to look. Russell didn't leak the information directly. That would be too crude. Instead, he sent an anonymous tip to a freelance journalist he knew who specialized in pharmaceutical industry investigations. The journalist, hungry for a story, started making calls to sources in Greenwich. By 5 p.m., several prominent Greenwich residents had been contacted by a journalist asking about the Rogers family and old FDA investigations. Word spread quickly in tight-knit social circles. Dolores called Naomi 12 times between 5 and 6 p.m. Then she started texting. Answer your phone. How dare you let him do this? You're destroying your own family. I raised you better than this. Naomi showed Russell the texts. Her hands were steady now. She still hasn't apologized, Naomi noted. No, she's still trying to maintain control. She thinks if she yells loud enough, you'll fold. Russell looked at his watch. She has 7 hours left. What's next? Patience. Let the pressure build. Right now, she's scrambling, making calls, trying to fix things. But every person she calls either can't help her or doesn't want to get involved. She's learning what it feels like to be powerless. Sam wandered into the kitchen around 6:30, his bandaged hands making it difficult to do much. Russell helped him with dinner, spaghetti, Sam's favorite, and they ate together as a family. Sam talked about a dinosaur book he was reading, and for a little while, things felt almost normal. After dinner, Russell tucked Sam into bed again. Dad, Sam's voice was small. Is Grandma Dolores mad at us? Grandma Dolores is learning an important lesson about treating people with respect. Is she mad because I broke her glass? Russell sat on the edge of Sam's bed. Buddy, listen to me. What happened with the glass wasn't your fault. Accidents happen to everyone. What Grandma did afterward, making you pick up the pieces when you could have been hurt, that was wrong. Adults should protect kids, not hurt them to prove a point. But she said I needed to learn responsibility. There's a difference between learning responsibility and being punished for an accident. You know how when you make a mistake at school, your teacher helps you learn from it? She doesn't hurt you, right? Sam nodded. That's how adults are supposed to act. Grandma Dolores forgot that. So now she's learning it herself. How? Russell smiled. By understanding what it feels like when someone more powerful than you decides to teach you a lesson. After Sam fell asleep, Russell returned to his office. It was 8 p.m., 16 hours since his confrontation with Dolores. 8 hours left on his deadline. His phone showed 43 missed calls from Dolores, 15 from Gregory, and several from numbers he didn't recognize, probably other Rogers family members who'd been recruited to apply pressure. He called his associate, a woman named Kate Hurst who specialized in digital reputation management. Kate, it's Russell. Status update. The search engine optimization you requested is complete. Anyone searching for Dolores Rogers Greenwich now sees articles about child safety, discussions about grandparent boundaries, and several blog posts about recognizing abusive behavior in family dynamics. And the social media? Several parenting forums in Connecticut have posts discussing an unnamed Greenwich grandmother who made a child pick up broken glass. No names mentioned, but enough details that locals will connect the dots. The posts are getting significant engagement. Perfect. Send me the final invoice. Russell's plan was multi-layered. The frozen bank accounts created immediate, practical pressure. The loss of social standing attacked Dolores's identity and self-worth. The family reputation damage struck at what the Rogers name meant in Greenwich. And the social media whisper campaign ensured that even if Dolores tried to tough it out, the court of public opinion had already rendered its verdict. But he wasn't done yet. At 9 p.m., Russell activated the fourth pressure point, professional consequences. Gregory Rogers worked as a consultant for several pharmaceutical companies, trading on his father-in-law's old connections and his own network. Russell had discovered that Gregory sat on an advisory board for a mid-sized biotech company called Nexigen Therapeutics. Russell called the CEO of Nexigen, a man named Harold Romero who Russell had briefly worked with on a merger negotiation 2 years prior. "Harold, it's Russell Dyer. I need to give you some information about one of your board members." He explained the situation with Sam, keeping his tone professional but letting the facts speak for themselves. Then he added, "I thought you should know, given that Nexigen's brand focuses heavily on family health and children's wellness. If this story becomes public, and there's a journalist already digging into the Rogers family, you'll want to have addressed it proactively." Harold was quiet for a long moment. "Send me the details. I'll bring it to the board tomorrow." "I appreciate your time, Harold." At 10 p.m., Dolores finally called Russell directly. He answered on the third ring. "You son of a bitch," she hissed. "What have you done?" "I'm teaching you a lesson about consequences," Russell said calmly. "The same way you taught Sam. You've ruined me. Our accounts are frozen. I've been removed from boards. People are calling asking about my father's research. Gregory's company is asking questions. You made my son bleed to prove a point about authority. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? It was a few cuts. Children recover. And you'll recover from this," Russell said. "Assuming you learn the lesson. What do you want? Money? Is that what this is about?" Russell laughed, and it was a cold sound. "I don't want your money, Dolores. I want you to understand something fundamental. You don't get to hurt people, especially children, without consequences. You've spent decades using fear and control to manipulate Naomi and probably countless others. You've believed that your money and social position made you untouchable. I never. You made an 8-year-old child pick up broken glass with his bare hands. You watched him bleed, and you felt satisfied that you'd taught him a lesson. That's sociopathic, Dolores. How dare you? You have 2 hours left on my deadline. 2 hours to call Naomi and Sam, apologize sincerely, and admit what you did was wrong. If you don't, tomorrow morning I activate pressure points 5 through 8. There's more. Oh, Dolores. We've barely scratched the surface. I know about the country club membership that's up for renewal next month. I know about the zoning variance you need for your property renovations. I know about Gregory's consulting contracts and exactly how tenuous they are. I know where every thread of your life can be pulled to make it all unravel. You're insane. No, I'm a father protecting his son, and I'm very, very good at what I do." Russell's voice softened, became almost gentle. "Here's what you don't understand, Dolores. Everything you're feeling right now, the helplessness, the frustration, the fear that everything you've built is falling apart. That's how Sam felt when you made him pick up that glass. That's how Naomi felt watching her mother hurt her son and being too conditioned to stop it." Dolores was crying now, angry, frustrated tears. "Please, just stop this. Apologize to Sam. Mean it. And never touch him again. I'll apologize. I'll do whatever you want. 2 hours, Dolores. And remember, I'll know if you're faking it." He hung up. Naomi was waiting in their bedroom. "She called you." "She did. She's breaking." Russell sat beside his wife. "The question is whether she learns the lesson or just pretends to. What happens if she fakes the apology?" Russell's expression hardened. "Then I show her what real consequences look like." At 11:47 p.m., 13 minutes before Russell's deadline, Dolores Rogers called Naomi's phone. Naomi answered, putting it on speaker. "Naomi." Dolores's voice was ragged, stripped of its usual imperious tone. "Is Sam awake?" "No, Mom. It's almost midnight. I need to apologize. To both of you." Naomi looked at Russell. He nodded slightly, his expression unreadable. "I'm listening," Naomi said. "What I did to Sam was wrong. I was angry about the glass, and I wanted to teach him a lesson, but I hurt him. I made him bleed. I watched him cry and I told myself it was for his own good, but it wasn't. It was cruel." Silence stretched. Russell watched Naomi's face, seeing the conflict there, The lifetime of conditioning that said accept the apology, smooth things over, make peace. Is that all? Naomi asked, and Russell felt proud. I don't know how to fix this, Dolores said, and for the first time, she sounded genuinely lost. I don't know how to be wrong. My whole life, I've been in control, and I've told myself that control meant I was right. That if I could enforce my will, then my will must be just. That's not an apology, Mom. That's an explanation. I'm sorry. Dolores's voice cracked. I'm sorry I hurt Sam. I'm sorry I've hurt you over the years with my criticism and my need to control everything. I'm sorry I'm the kind of person who would rather be right than kind. And I'm sorry it took your husband destroying my life in a single day to make me see it. Russell leaned forward. Dolores, this is Russell. Why did you make Sam pick up the glass? A long pause. Because I could. Because I was angry at him for breaking something in my home, and I wanted him to understand that actions have consequences. And now I understand that I'm not the only one who can make actions have consequences. Her laugh was bitter. You made your point, Russell. I've lost everything today. My accounts, my boards, my reputation. Even Gregory is barely speaking to me. You haven't lost everything, Russell said quietly. You still have a chance to be a grandmother Sam isn't afraid of. A mother Naomi doesn't have to apologize for. A person who chooses kindness over control. And if I can't be that person, then you'll finish losing everything. Because I'm very patient, Dolores, and very thorough. What I did today can be reversed, mostly. Your accounts will unfreeze. Your boards might take you back. The gossip will fade. But if you ever hurt Sam again, if you ever make Naomi feel like she has to choose between her mother and her son, I won't stop at social consequences. Is that a threat? It's a promise. I spent 6 years learning how to break people without ever raising a hand. I can make your life a living hell while looking like a concerned son-in-law. So yes, Dolores, learn the lesson or learn what happens when you don't. After the call ended, Naomi sat in silence for a long moment. Do you think she meant it? She finally asked. Some of it. The part about not knowing how to be wrong, that was real. Whether she can actually change. Russell shrugged. Time will tell. But she's scared now. And scared people are careful people. What happens tomorrow? Tomorrow, I start reversing the pressure points. The bank accounts will unfreeze. The social media posts will gradually disappear. Life will return to something like normal. And if she backslides? Russell pulled Naomi close. Then I'll remind her what happens when she does. But I don't think she will. At least not for a while. Today, she learned that being cruel has consequences. That might not make her kind, but it'll make her cautious. They went to bed, and for the first time in 2 days, Naomi slept soundly. The next morning, Russell made a series of calls. To Marcus at the bank, confirming that the investigation had been concluded and accounts could be unfrozen. To Catherine Ashworth, suggesting that perhaps Dolores had learned from her mistake and deserved a second chance with the charity boards. To Kate Hurst, requesting that the SEO campaign be gradually scaled back. By noon, Dolores Rogers had her life back. Damaged, certainly. Changed, definitely. But functional. She called Naomi at 2 p.m. I'd like to see Sam, she said carefully. If that's all right with you. I want to apologize to him in person. Naomi looked at Russell. He considered for a moment, then nodded. You can come to our house, Naomi said. Saturday afternoon. Russ and I will both be here. Of course. I understand. Saturday came. Dolores arrived at exactly 2 p.m., dressed more simply than Russell had ever seen her, slacks and a blouse. No jewelry except her wedding ring. She looked older, somehow, diminished. Gregory was with her. He gave Russell a long look, but said nothing. Sam came into the living room hesitantly, his hands still bandaged though healing well. He looked at his grandmother with wary eyes. Dolores knelt down. Russell had never seen her kneel for anything, and met Sam's gaze. Sam, I need to tell you something. What I did last week when you broke the glass was wrong. Very wrong. I hurt you, and I'm so sorry. Sam looked at his parents, then back at his grandmother. Why did you do it? Because I was angry, and I wanted to teach you a lesson. But the lesson I tried to teach was cruel. The real lesson is that adults should protect children, not hurt them. And I failed at that. My hands hurt a lot, Sam said quietly. I know. And I'm so sorry. I hope someday you can forgive me, but I understand if you can't. Sam thought about this with the seriousness only children can bring to matters of justice. Okay, he finally said. But don't do it again. I won't. I promise. After Dolores and Gregory left, Sam went back to playing with his dinosaur toys. Naomi and Russell stood in the kitchen, watching their son through the doorway. "Do you think it's over?" Naomi asked. "No," Russell said honestly. "She'll test the boundaries again eventually. People like Dolores don't change overnight. But she knows now that there are consequences. Real ones. And she knows I won't hesitate to enforce them." "Those 47 missed calls," Naomi said. "She called you that many times?" Russell pulled out his phone, showed her the call log. 47. Between yesterday morning and last night. All begging you to stop. Most of them. The last few were actually her trying to understand why this was happening. That's when I knew we'd broken through. Naomi shook her head, a small smile on her lips. "You really did make her learn a lesson." She made Sam pick up broken glass with his bare hands. "I made her pick up the pieces of her life with hers. Fair is fair." 3 months later, Dolores was still on her best behavior. She called before visiting, asked permission before giving Sam anything, and kept her criticism to herself. The change wasn't total. Russell caught glimpses of the old Dolores in how she held herself, in the occasional tightness around her mouth when she disagreed with something. But she was trying, and that was something. Gregory pulled Russell aside one afternoon when they were all at the Dyer house for a barbecue. "I need to know," Gregory said quietly. "Could you really have kept going?" Made things worse. Russell flipped burgers on the grill, considering his answer. "Yes. I had 8 pressure points mapped out. We only activated 4. What were the others?" "Does it matter?" She learned the lesson. "I'd like to know what you were willing to do." Russell met Gregory's eyes. Number 5 was leaking the FDA investigation details to major pharmaceutical trade publications, which would have destroyed your consulting business. Number 6 was filing a formal complaint with Connecticut Child Services, complete with medical records and witness statements. Number 7 was a civil lawsuit for intentional infliction of emotional distress. Difficult to prove, but the publicity alone would have been devastating. And number 8. Russell paused. Number 8 was showing Dolores exactly what her life would look like if Naomi and Sam disappeared from it entirely. No visits, no calls, no grandchildren. A restraining order if necessary. Gregory's face had gone pale. "You would have done all that. To protect my son?" Without hesitation, Russell closed the grill lid. "But I didn't have to. Because Dolores is smart enough to recognize when she's beaten. Some people need to learn that lesson the hard way. She's afraid of you now." "Good. Fear can be a teacher too. Not the kind I prefer, but effective." "You're a dangerous man, Russell." Russell smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Only to people who hurt my family. Everyone else has nothing to worry about." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching through the kitchen window as Dolores helped Sam with a puzzle, patient and gentle. "Thank you," Gregory said finally. Russell looked at him, surprised. "I've watched Dolores steamroll people for 40 years, Gregory continued. "Including me. Including our daughter. I told myself it was just her personality, that it didn't really hurt anyone. But watching what she did to Sam." He shook his head. "Someone needed to stop her. I couldn't. Naomi couldn't. You did. I'm not a hero, Gregory. I'm just a father who loves his son. Sometimes that's the same thing." Inside, Sam laughed at something Dolores said, the sound bright and clear and unafraid. Naomi looked out the window and caught Russell's eye, smiling. That night, after everyone had gone home and Sam was asleep, Russell found the old call log on his phone. 47 missed calls from Dolores Rogers, time-stamped across 18 hours of mounting desperation. He didn't delete it. It served as a reminder of what he was capable of when pushed, of what lessons could be taught when words failed. Sam's hands had healed completely. The scars faded to thin white lines that would probably disappear entirely within the year. But the lesson remained, carved into the Rogers family dynamics like those scars had been carved into Sam's palms. Actions had consequences. Power could be challenged. Cruelty would be answered. And Russell Dyer would always protect his son. Some people needed to learn that the hard way. Dolores Rogers had learned it in 24 hours. 47 missed calls later, she'd understood perfectly. 6 months after the incident, things had settled into a new normal. Dolores was never quite the same. There was a carefulness to her now, a hesitation before she spoke that had never been there before. She was kinder to Sam, more respectful to Naomi, and she treated Russell with something approaching fear disguised as respect. Russell had kept his promise. The bank accounts had unfrozen. The charity boards had cautiously welcomed her back. The social media whispers had faded. Life had returned to normal, but the power dynamic had shifted permanently. One evening, Naomi asked him, "Do you ever regret it? What you did to her?" Russell thought about Sam's bleeding hands, about his son's tears, about the tremor in Sam's voice when he'd apologized for breaking a glass. "Not for a second," he said. And he meant it. Because some lessons needed to be taught. Some boundaries needed to be enforced. And some people, like Dolores Rogers, needed to learn that there were consequences for cruelty, even when you thought your position made you untouchable. Russell Dyer had taught that lesson in 24 hours. It was a lesson Dolores would never forget, and neither would he. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.